The strangest thing about being deeply perceptive is that it looks like strength from the outside and feels like confinement on the inside. You notice the shift before the sentence ends. You catch the tension before anyone admits it. You sense danger before it has fully taken shape. And yet the more aware you become, the less free you often feel. What others call insight can quietly turn into over-monitoring. What seems like emotional intelligence can become a life lived in anticipation. So if your awareness has ever made you tired rather than powerful, this may not be a flaw in your character, but a survival system that never truly learned to stand down. If this already feels uncomfortably familiar, stay with mind Psypher a little longer, because what exhausts you may not be life itself, but the way you've learned to carry it. To understand that contradiction, we have to follow the moment. The mind begins to confuse anticipation with safety. Some people seem to move through the world with a nervous system tuned to an unusually fine resolution. Where others register the surface of a moment, they catch its undertow, a pause in someone's voice, a smile that lands a second too late, a stiffness in the shoulders that says more than the words do. They do not set out to analyze everything. They simply receive more of what is already there. And then there are those who did not begin that way, but became that way. Not because they chose vigilance, but because vigilance once made sense. In emotionally unstable environments, especially in childhood, safety can depend on reading the room correctly. A child learns very quickly when warmth can turn into distance, when calm can turn into criticism, when affection can become unpredictability. And so the body begins to study people before the mind has language for what it is doing. It learns to scan faces, tones, footsteps, silences. It learns that being caught off guard hurts. It learns that noticing early might soften the blow. Years later, the child grows up, but the training remains. The house may be gone. The people may be gone. The original danger may no longer be present in any obvious form. Yet the internal system stays loyal to the old job. It keeps watching, it keeps listening, it keeps preparing. What once protected the person from emotional whiplash becomes an invisible pattern running beneath ordinary life. That is why, in adulthood, a perfectly ordinary exchange can become crowded with hidden meaning. Someone replies more briefly than usual, and the mind begins its work. Was that irritation, distance, disappointment, a sign of withdrawal, a warning? A harmless delay that would pass unnoticed for someone else can feel like a door quietly shifting on its hinges. A compliment is not simply heard, it is examined. A silence is not merely a silence, it becomes a question mark with a pulse. From the outside, this may look like sensitivity. From the inside, it can feel more like a marathon that never announces its start. The body may be still, but the mind is already moving through possible explanations, rehearsing outcomes, measuring risks, connecting present details to past patterns. It is exhausting to live in a state where so little passes through you untouched. And the difficulty is not only that such a person notices more, it is that they often feel responsible for what they notice. The moment they sense tension in a room, part of them becomes alert to it. If someone nearby seems off, their attention goes there almost automatically. If a conversation changes temperature, they do not simply observe it, they absorb it. A portion of their inner world is recruited to manage something that may not even belong to them. This is where deep perception begins to blur into emotional overcarrying. Many highly aware people become unintentional caretakers of atmosphere. They can feel when someone is trying to hide sadness. They can hear strain behind politeness. They can sense when a person is speaking from fatigue rather than clarity. And because they can sense it, they often begin to hold it. Not on purpose, not dramatically, just quietly, steadily in the nervous system. By the end of the day, they may look as though nothing particularly difficult has happened, yet they return home depleted, carrying traces of too many unspoken things, other people's tension, other people's disappointment, their own endless interpretations layered on top of it all. What wears them down is not always the visible event. Often, it is the invisible labor of reading, anticipating, containing, and adjusting. At some point, this vigilance turns inward as well. The person does not only monitor the room, they monitor themselves. Their own feelings are examined almost before they are fully felt. Why am I upset? Is this reasonable? Is this reaction too much? Am I being unfair? Am I imagining it? Could I have handled that better? What appears from a distance to be self-awareness can in fact become a subtle form of constant self-surveillance, and that has a cost, because when you are always standing slightly outside your own experience, analyzing it while it happens, it becomes difficult to simply live it. Joy is observed, sadness is interrogated, attraction is doubted, rest is interrupted by the urge to interpret what the rest means. Even your own inner life begins to feel as though it must justify itself before it is allowed to exist. Relationships become especially complicated under this kind of awareness, not because the person lacks depth, but because they often see too many layers at once. A simple apology can raise a dozen questions about motive. A kind gesture can be split into sincerity, guilt, fear, habit, politeness, and self-interest before it is ever fully received. They do not lose closeness because they do not care. Often they lose it because they care so much and because they can no longer meet another person on just one level. Every moment has a visible version and a hidden version, and both demand attention. Over time, innocence becomes difficult. Trust becomes slower, ease becomes rare. Even tenderness can feel complicated, because tenderness is never just tenderness when your mind is trained to search for what may follow it. Some people are not afraid of love itself. They are afraid of everything their awareness can detect around love: its fragility, its inconsistency, its mixed motives, its capacity to shift without warning. Then there is the body, which plays its own part in this cycle. For some people, awareness is not only directed outward towards faces and atmospheres, it is also turned inward towards heartbeat, breath, muscle tension, warmth, dizziness, pressure in the chest, changes in the stomach, a cup of coffee, a bad night's sleep, a stressful morning, a moment of social pressure. Any of these can trigger small bodily sensations, but for a system already primed for danger, those sensations can be misread as evidence that something is wrong. A racing heart becomes a signal. The signal becomes a threat. The threat creates fear. Fear intensifies the bodily sensation, and then the body appears to confirm the mind's alarm. So a loop forms, elegant in its logic and cruel in its effect. The person is not inventing distress. They are caught in a system where interpretation and sensation keep strengthening each other. Eventually, this way of moving through life begins to harden into a philosophy. If I can predict enough, I can avoid pain. If I can understand every shift, I won't be blindsided. If I can read people accurately enough, I can protect myself before anything breaks. It sounds sensible. It even sounds wise, but it comes at a terrible price. Because life does not hand over all its variables in advance. No amount of observation can remove uncertainty from love, work, friendship, grief, timing, or change. And so many deeply aware people end up trapped in a quiet paralysis, not because they are weak, but because they can see too much at once. Every decision comes with too many possible consequences. Every beginning contains too many imagined endings. Every risk arrives already wearing the face of what might go wrong. So while others are living imperfectly, they are often standing at the edge of experience, trying to think their way into safety before they step in. But perhaps the gentlest truth here is that this pattern is not proof of brokenness. It is often proof of adaptation. Something in you learnt very early or very deeply that paying close attention might reduce harm. And perhaps at one time it did. The trouble is not that your system failed. The trouble is that it kept performing yesterday's task inside today's life, which means the way forward is not to become duller, colder, or less feeling. Healing is not the same as becoming numb. The aim is not to stop noticing. The aim is to stop carrying every signal as though it were an instruction. That begins with one quiet realization. Not every silence is about you. Not every shift in tone is a hidden message. Not every delay is rejection. Not every unreadable expression is a verdict. Other people have inner weather too, and much of it has nothing to do with your worth. The moment you stop personalizing every ambiguous cue, the mind loosens by a fraction. And sometimes a fraction is where freedom begins. A second shift is learning that not every feeling requires immediate action. A sensation can be present without becoming an emergency. A wave of anxiety can move through the body without being treated as prophecy. A low mood can exist without needing to be solved at once. When you stop turning every internal ripple into a command, the nervous system slowly learns a forgotten distinction. Discomfort is not always danger. And perhaps the hardest lesson of all is this one. Not everything you understand is yours to hold. You can sense someone's sadness without absorbing it into your bones. You can recognize tension without becoming its caretaker. You can perceive a fracture in a relationship without appointing yourself its repairer. Boundaries do not make perception less kind. They make kindness survivable. At first, this may feel unnatural. If you have spent years equating vigilance with responsibility, letting go can feel almost irresponsible. But over time, another kind of strength appears. You notice the room, and yet you do not disappear into it. You sense the shift, and yet you remain with yourself. You feel the body stir with alarm, and yet you do not immediately hand that alarm the steering wheel. That is not indifference. That is maturity in the nervous system. That is perception without self-abandonment. And maybe that is what healing looks like for people who have always noticed too much. Not a dramatic transformation, not a personality transplant. Just a gradual softening of what used to be held with clenched hands. The awareness remains, but it changes shape. It stops behaving like a blade that cuts through every moment in search of hidden danger. It becomes something warmer, steadier, more merciful. A sharp beam can expose every crack. A candle, though, does something different. It still gives light, but it also gives warmth. It lets you see without turning every imperfection into a threat. It lets you stay close to life without constantly interrogating it. So if you've made it this far, perhaps you already know how heavy it is to live, as though your mind must always arrive first. And perhaps what you need is not to notice less, but to carry less. Less of other people's weather, less of every unfinished possibility, less of the belief that safety can only be earned through constant anticipation. And if one day you find yourself in a room that would once have pulled you into endless analysis, and instead you simply breathe, notice, and remain, do not underestimate that moment. It may look small from the outside, but inside it is a quiet revolution. And perhaps healing does not ask you to become less perceptive at all. Perhaps it only asks that your sensitivity no longer be used against you. If you'd like to keep exploring these inner landscapes, stay with Psypher.